Hi, you're in Steve's Kitchen and a huge welcome. I'm going to start a series of fresh Italian pasta dishes. So I'm going to start this off by showing you how easy it is to make pasta at home. It really is so very simple and delicious. If you haven't made it yourself before, come on, let me show you how. Now, if you're going to the trouble of making your own pasta, you might as well get good produce. Free-range eggs, I'm using 00 flour. All-purpose flour will do. You don't want a bread flour, it's got too much gluten in it, it'll make tough pasta. And it's 1 egg to 100 grams, that's about 3.5 ounces of flour, and that will serve one person. And a little bit of salt in there, that's all you need. Now, come down here, I've got 200 grams of flour here, and I'm going to be using 2 eggs. I'm just going to make a little volcano in the center here, but also a little tip. Take a couple of tablespoons of flour out of the pile. It's easier to add that flour in later than it is to add more liquid into the pasta. And the reason I'm doing that is because eggs vary in size and it's harder to add more egg or liquid into the pasta. Better to start a little wet and add some flour back in. Let's take one of these eggs now. We're just going to break it into the center of our pasta. Hopefully it won't flood over the edges. Now I'm also going to add a pinch of salt in there, maybe a couple of pinches. Then take your fork and just start to whisk those eggs together. Now you can see there we're starting to get a nice wet batter. I'm going to get my hands in there and get a little bit dirty now. We're just going to bring the rest of the flour in and start to make this up into our pasta dough. And if I feel it's too wet, I'll add that extra flour, but for the time being, I'm not going to pop it in there. Now you see that dough there, although that's sticking to my fingers, I can see that it's going to draw together into a nice pasta. I'm not going to use this flour, maybe just a tiny bit of it. So that's the reason I don't add the flour in or all the flour in one go. Now I'm just going to knead that dough. I can feel it's still a little bit sticky, so I might draw a little bit of that flour in. And what we're looking for is a Play-Doh type consistency in our dough. We don't want it to be sticky to our hands, but I do want a dough that's a little softer, a little silkier. So I've got to work this a little bit longer because I'm going to be hand rolling this. I don't want it to be too tough. Now will you look at that beautiful pasta dough. It's soft, it's just a little bit sticky. I didn't use all the flour, and that's a great tip. Don't put all the flour in at once. You'll end up with this wonderful dough, which we have to leave now for about half an hour to an hour. Just let it settle and allow the flour to expand a little bit. So join me back here in a moment. Now come and take a look at this dough. I'm just going to take it out of the plastic wrap and you'll see that it's gone beautiful and silky and soft, and that's what happens when you let that dough settle for a while. Now some of you will have a pasta rolling machine. I've got a mechanical one here, which is great if you haven't got someone having to crank the handle, but not everybody does, so I'm going to show you both techniques. Let's take this beautiful soft dough. I'm just going to divide it approximately in half. Now if you're using a rolling machine like this, mechanical or otherwise, start with the largest setting. You'll have a fairly big gap in the rollers. Now this is a little noisy, so I'll turn it on and talk over as I do it. Whoops, that was way too noisy. Now I've just muted that and I'm going to do a talk over. The idea is that you feed the pasta through, making the rollers closer and closer together as you do so. And each time you can fold the pasta in half and you will see as it goes through, it will get silkier and smoother. Now eventually you'll end up with a sheet of pasta that you can see your hand through, and this is perfect if you're just going to cut this up for lasagna sheets, or if you want to dust a little flour over this. You can also, let me just get some flour so it doesn't stick. You can also then just fold or roll. It doesn't have to be a tight roll. You can either tightly roll it or you can actually just loosely roll it up like so. Then when you've got your piece of rolled pasta, you can just take a sharp knife. Now there's usually an excess at the end there. We can either just trim that off. But if you want to do tagliatelle cut, you can just cut it, or even thinner. You can cut them to a linguine or even go thinner. I'm actually not going to do different sizes. I'm going to possibly go for something around a tagliatelle. You can take each of these and just unroll them like that. Now, years ago, I used to hang these over a washing dryer, but you don't actually need to do that. With this coating of flour, you can just take these pieces of pasta and just sort of roll them up into a little nest like that, and they will dry on the side and be ready to use for fresh pasta. It is so delicious and it cooks so quick. Now, if you haven't got a rolling machine, let me show you how you can do this by hand. Now, don't forget, any piece of pasta you are not using, keep them wrapped in the plastic so they don't dry out. Now, look at those beautiful pieces of tagliatelle. Now, correct me if I'm wrong and they're a different size. I'm gonna show you how to do those by hand. Because our pasta is lovely and soft and malleable. Again, all we're going to do is lightly flour our surface, stretch this dough out a little bit flat. I like to keep it a little squarish if I can. It's not always easy to do. A little bit of flour on your rolling pin, and all you're going to do is just roll this pasta out, much the same as the machine would do, but because we're soft, you can do this relatively easy. Now, it's important to remember not to actually pinch the ends of the dough. In other words, don't go over the end and pinch it, because that will make a thin edge to your pasta and it makes it an uneven roll. So we'll roll to there and stop. Turn it, again, roll and stop. And with a little bit of patience, a little bit of elbow grease, occasionally dusting the counter so it doesn't stick, we're going to be able to get this as thin as we could on the machine. Now, another technique I often see used is where you roll the pasta over the pin. Now, it works better with the thinner rolling pins. I haven't got one of those, but you can actually roll it like this to get a slightly thinner pasta. Now, you'll see I'm already starting to get a fairly thin pasta. I can start to see my hands through it. Just keep working it. But when I get down to the level that I want, I'm just going to again lightly flour the surface. And exactly the same as before, we can just start to fold this up. We'll have an uneven edge, but it doesn't really matter. We just fold this up. And then using my board, I'll take a little salvage edge off, but then I will start to just cut these off one at a time. Some of them will be a little longer than others, but you'll see that they still unroll beautifully and we still have wonderful, they're a little shorter on this end, they'll get longer towards the middle. So I'll just unravel some of those from the center, and you'll see just how quickly they unravel and how wonderful they are. Now, if I get a little group of those, just like the ones over here, we can just roll them up and just let them semi-dry on the side there. And when you've finished, you are going to have the most beautiful pasta, homemade pasta. You can't beat it. There are many different techniques. There are some different flours. Some people use tapioca flour. Really, this isn't about making it the correct way. It's about having a go, making pasta at home and experiencing the difference, because homemade pasta, you really just can't beat it. So please share this video out with your friends on social media, give it the thumbs up, and I will see you for a whole series of Italian pasta which we've got coming up shortly. Take care. I'm going to get on. It doesn't take me long to cut these. I hope you've enjoyed this video today. It's been a lot of fun. Look, I'll leave some links to some other videos and I'd love to hear your comments. Don't be too critical of me if you are from Italy and you think I've done it wrong. This is the way I make pasta. It tastes great and I'm just encouraging people to get out there and give it a try. Be good and I'll see you next time. Buy good ingredients. Free range egg. Not getting there, am I?